All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Tat2d Preacher podcast. This is episode number 8. And on today's episode, I want to give a raw, unfiltered, unscripted reaction to the whole Grammys situation that happened this past Sunday. So I'm recording this February the 9th, which is Thursday. And so February 5th was the Grammys. And then there was we all know, this whole Sam Smith performance and how crazy that was. But then I also want to look at and address the Christian contingent that was there. And, what that looks like, and there's so many videos out there reacting to this about how we're gonna get into that, but so that's where we're going on this episode. I want to just give a raw reaction to that whole situation, and it's gonna be good. But before I get there, as always, I want to encourage you all, if you haven't already, go give me a follow on Instagram and TikTok at the Tat2d Preacher. Go check out my YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't already. And I also want to encourage you, if you haven't yet, even right now, press pause on this podcast. If you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts, press pause. Go and just give me a courtesy 5-star review. That would just help me get this podcast out into the podcast world. So please, if you haven't already, just do that. Give me a 5-star review. That would be amazing. And you can comment when you give me the review where you're listening from. Be cool to know. So that's my plug. So yeah, it's going to be a good episode today. It's going to be raw. It's going to be unfiltered. And sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Okay, so again, this past Sunday was the Grammys. And every single year, there's always something, there's always a performance or performances or, some kind of element that is questionable, sketchy, demonic, satanic, occultic, all of the above. So it's not shocking or surprising that something like that would happen. I mean, it's been happening every single year, pretty much every performance, whether it's Oscars, whether it's Grammys, whether it's Super Bowl halftime shows. I mean, it's getting more and more in our face. And so in the grand scheme of things, this past Sunday, it wasn't shocking to see what Sam Smith did. Because again, we've been seeing this for years now, but he just kind of took it to a whole other level. And I think this whole scenario, I think it's fascinating for a few reasons now, because for starters, we've been living in a culture and, a society, at least in the Western world, that it has been predominantly atheistic. The religious world, or the spirituality in general that people believe or adhere to, and fill in the blank with any kind of belief. It's always been kind of like we're looked down upon. And the scientific worldview has always been dominant. But what's happening, I think what's happening, especially this past Sunday, is that, and I actually did a video on Instagram and TikTok a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, month and a half ago, where I said, I think that atheism is dying. It's a dying belief system. And this idea that there is no God, that this is just all random, that, life is meaningless. There's no inherent value in life. We're just a byproduct of a whole conglomeration of cells and stuff mushed together that's evolved. And that whole worldview is dying. And this past Sunday, I think, has opened up a lot of people's eyes, because there it was in front of millions of people, this display of satanic ritual worship. You can't deny it. And you have all of the celebrities there watching. Everyone was there, all taking this in, and it's all staged, it's all planned. I mean, they all know exactly what's going on, what they're doing. But it's fascinating because it's putting that on the map. Like, people, it's going to become harder and harder now to believe that God, Satan, Christianity, faith, religion, all of that stuff is garbage. It's pushing culture now. It's putting it to the forefront. I mean, you have, like, if you just watch that performance, I mean, you literally had, it's like, I think Sam Smith was dressed up as the devil, right? And you had demons there, and it was just this whole reenactment, this whole ritual ceremony for the world to see. It's not, they're like not hiding it. They're not being shy about it. And it was funny, after the performance, they had the host, what's his name, Trevor Noah, did some kind of a skit where he was phoning his mom, and just to bring humor to it, to kind of, make it look like, just to kind of downplay what actually just happened. And I think in the skit, he was just like, "Hey, Mom, no, we weren't worshiping the devil. Everything is good here. We're safe." And then his mom on the other line was like, "Okay, I'm going to pray for you guys." And then everyone was laughing, just kind of downplaying this moment, because everyone knew what just happened. I mean, it's so incredibly obvious. And I think everyone, I've seen so many videos and TikToks and people reacting to this who are not even Christian. They're not even believers, yet looked at that and said, "Okay, like, what's going on here? Something is definitely going on here." And so I think that this is a massive awakening in our culture. And I think this notion that there is no such thing as an afterlife, there is no such thing as God, there is no such thing as, any of that stuff, that segment of the population is going to grow smaller and smaller till they don't exist anymore. And so I think we are living in a very interesting time. Like, there's a massive shift literally that's taking place before our eyes. And as Christians, I think that we should be excited, because it's like, we should be excited because for the first time, it's like we can see things playing out. We can see the enemy show their hand. It's like it's like the devil has now thrusted himself to the spotlight, completely to the spotlight, and been like, he's like, "World, I'm here." And it's like, wow, it's on. And I think that as Christians, we should be very excited, because the harvest now, I think more than ever, the harvest, the unbelieving world, they are more ripe now. They are more open now. They're going to be becoming more and more open now to the gospel, to Jesus, to the reality of Christianity, the reality of God, the reality, all of that, more so now than ever before. I think we're living in a super powerful time where where it may seem like in some respects it's getting darker and darker, but in other respects it's going to get brighter and brighter because it's like it's going to be on now. And I know for me, I'm excited. I'm excited now to that our culture that our culture is getting to a place where the spiritual world is going to take the forefront. It's not going to be hiding in the shadows anymore. It's not going to be on the fringe. It's going to be legit. Like this stuff is real because it is real. And back in, the time of the Bible, atheism and this whole idea where God doesn't exist, that worldview was so minuscule, if at all. The question way back in the time of the Old Testament and going into the New Testament, the question wasn't, is God real? The question was, which God is the real one? Which God is real? And I think now we're getting back to that reality where it's not going to be, is God real? Is God dead? Does he exist? It's going to be, no, okay. We know there's stuff going on that's bigger than we can see or understand. We know that, so which God is the real one? This is the time I think we're entering into. And it's going to be like, in a lot of ways, like we saw in the Bible, it's going to be the battle of the gods. The God of the Bible versus the gods of the nations. And there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened. Just read the Old Testament. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happened. And when the kingdom of darkness meets the kingdom of light, kingdom of heaven, man, we're entering into some pretty exciting times, despite how dark things may be. And so I wanted to start off by saying that this past Sunday with the performance it's like the devil stepped onto the scene and is like, I'm here. And it's like, I think that should cause the Christian to wake up and be like, wow, okay, now it's on. Like it's always been there. It's kind of been growing over the last number of years. You see it, but there's something about this past year that just kind of put it in on a different level, where when you have non-Christians, unbelievers commenting on it, saying something's off with this, something's different here, something is, when that's happening, something's changed. And so I think this is a wake-up call for the church, a wake-up call for Christians to get prayed up, to get serious about their faith, to get serious about their relationship with God, to get serious about the fact that we are in a spiritual battle, a spiritual war, and especially as we get closer and closer to the end, it's just going to get more intense. It's going to get more real. And so passive Christianity, man, if all the passive Christians, all the Christians who were just caught in comfort, they're not really deep, they're going to be exposed. Times are going to get tough. And if you're not anchored in your walk with God and in your relationship with God, it's going to be challenging. So this is a wake-up call, a huge wake-up call. But I think that we should be excited. Now, I want to use that as a segue into the second major thing that so many people had a problem with, had an issue with. And that had to do with the massive Christian contingent, because there were a whole bunch of Christian artists, Christian bands, Christian groups, who were nominated for awards, who won awards. There's a whole list of Christian Grammys. I don't even know all the names of them, but a lot of popular groups like Maverick City Music, I think Bethel Music was there. Just a lot of big Christian names. And so you see them there, they're walking down the red carpet doing the whole thing, and you see them on stage accepting their awards. Now, again, I didn't watch it, so I'm not sure. I think the Christian stuff is done previous to the main taping of the awards. I'm not sure. Think so. But regardless, they were all there and present, and they would have been in the audience witnessing, obviously, the whole evening, the whole night, and that performance by Sam Smith. And so many people reacted to this saying, how could all the Christians sit there? Why didn't they get up and walk out? Why did they participate? Is Christians being a part of this night? Are you being a witness? Are you being a light? Are you condoning it? Are you giving your approval? Are you just fitting in with the world? And so many people have their take, and they were just basically blasting the Christian contingent that was there. Now, again, this is a tricky issue. It's a touchy subject because on one side, what should Christians do when they are nominated to be part of these kinds of evenings? If you're a Christian actor and you're playing a role in a movie and you get nominated for an Oscar, do you not go because or do you not accept a role if it's not a Christian, quote unquote, Christian role? And if you win an award, do you not go and accept the award? If you're a Christian artist and you're nominated for a Grammy, should you not go because of the kinds of things that may or may not happen? And so it's tricky because it's like, what's the right thing to do? What's the godly thing to do in that? Should the answer just be complete separation? This whole night is secular, and so as Christians, we shouldn't be a part of that. We should completely stay away. Is that the right answer? Is the answer showing up and just having a good time? Not really being for it or a part of it, but not really being against it, kind of standing on the fence? Is that the right answer? Like, so many people have their own opinions, and it's tough. It's a tough situation. It's tough. Because if I think about myself, if I was an artist and I won an award, what would I do? Because you work hard and you want to be recognized and for what you've done. But at the same time, it's like, look at where you're going. So like it's tough. It's tricky. And then you want to add into the whole thing of what happened. Sitting in the audience, watching this performance take place. Clearly, it was one of the most demonic things that I think I've seen on the Grammys or any kind of performance. And you're sitting there watching that, and so people just freak out. And what's the right call? What's the right thing to do in that moment? What should Christians do in that moment? Should they have got up and walked out? Should they have not gone altogether? What do Christians do? And so I've had some time to think about it. And I know it's a tough choice. And I know there's people on both sides because, again, Christians, we're not to go and hide and be separate in that, there's the non-Christians and then there's the Christians and we don't associate. Because I think that there are certain, these people need to be reached too. Hollywood, as evil as they are, as evil as it can be, and as jacked up as it is, they still need Jesus. Jesus still hasn't come back yet. So we're still living in the time of grace. So on one set, I understand that, on one side, they need to be witnessed to. Christians need to be a light to them in that world, especially because how dark it is. They need the light. But then at the same time, Christians need to be above reproach. We need to be very mindful of what we're being a part of what we are associating with. and we need to be wise about that. So again, I get the tension, and it's easy to sit there and judge from the outside, but as I've thought about it and really thought about it and was like, okay, what would I feel like the Lord would want me to do? I think for me, seeing how that night played out, especially seeing that performance, I think I would have gotten up and walked out, because, there's times when I'm watching a movie or a show on Netflix, and if I see that there's stuff going on in the show that's not good, what do? You turn it off. There's shows now that I won't watch, movies that I won't watch, because you get convicted. And you say, well, obviously God doesn't want me to do this, so I'm turning it off. How much more should you not participate in something that transpired like that happened on Sunday, where it was literally a demonic display of the worship of Satan, literally. I don't know how you could sit there and watch that, take it all in. And not only that, but other things that happened during the night as well. I just don't know how you could sit there and not be convicted enough to get up and walk out. Of that entertainment scene, I think there needs to be a Christian presence there, because if there's no Christian presence there, then what hope do they have of ever receiving the gospel? So I think there does need to be a Christian presence there. I think the answer is not to completely remove all contact with the entertainment industry, but I think that the way things are going, the way the world's going, the way culture is going, the way society is going, I think there really needs to be a dividing line between what's sacred, between what's holy, what's righteous, what's honoring, and what's not. And if that means getting up and walking out of the Grammys because of what's happening, I think then that's the thing that needs to happen. Just like you would turn off a movie, just like you would walk out of a movie theater, just like you would turn off a song. I think that when you're in that kind of an environment and stuff is happening at such a level that's so beyond the line, I think there needs to be separation. I think staying in that environment, participating in that event during that whole thing, I don't think that's the play. Participating in it, watching it, associating with it, I don't think that's the play. I think that if it came out that a lot of the Christian artists that were there, if it came out, they all walked out during, I think that would have said a lot. But the fact that, I mean, maybe some of them did, I don't know. I've never heard of any reports coming out. And so I think that there has to be a line there. There has to be a line of separation. There's got to be some conviction that takes over, where that says, this is not okay. I can't be a part of this. Just like I'm reminded of the story of Daniel in the book of Daniel with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when the king made the whole decree to everyone had to bow down to the statue, to the ginormous idol, when the music started playing. And so everyone did it except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They didn't. They were part of that culture. They were, they were immersed in it, but they had a line that they wouldn't cross. And I think that as Christian artists in the entertainment industry, I think there really has to be a line where there's separation. There's a point that says we want to be a light, we want to be a witness, we want to be an example, we want to have a presence here, but once it reaches a certain place, we're done. We're out. And I think that by staying, by engaging in the event and what was happening, I think that line was blurred. And I think it would have been really cool to see the Christian contingent that was there really have a designated line that they weren't willing to cross. That would have been really cool to see. But unfortunately, that never happened. And I just think it looks really bad when you have non-Christians looking at the Christians saying, what were you guys doing? Like, why you were a part of that? You were associated with that? You didn't speak out against that? I mean, that says something. And it would have been really cool to see them step up and say, no, we're not cool with this. And so I think that going forward, what we saw there, I mean, it's Satan is showing his hand now. He's completely exposed. He's open. He's out there. Like you can't deny that now. He's drawing his line. And he's being very open about what he's doing, what he wants to do. And I think everyone's eyes are open now to seeing that. I mean, you can't deny that anymore. And I think going forward, it's going to get more and more intense. I think Christians who are in those spaces, who are in the entertainment industry, who are in the public spotlight, who have that platform, it's going to get harder and harder now. I think Christians are going to be pushed more and more to drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is where we stand. And you're going to see either a lot of, and we're seeing it, Christians caving, Christians getting swept up in culture, Christians walking away from God, or Christians changing their theology, Christians starting to believe things that are no longer biblical. I mean, we see it. Christians are getting forced to make a stand, to take a stand. And you're really going to see who's in love with Jesus. I mean, who's legit for him, who's sold out for Jesus, or who's not. And so I'm interested to see how these next few years look, because it's not going to get easier in the sense of being a Christian in those kind of spaces. It's going to get more difficult. And I'm interested to see who's going to stand firm, who's going to draw the line, and how many more times are we going to see Christians blend in, blur that line, not stand up, not take a stand? I don't know. It's just it's going to get a lot harder. And so my thoughts, I want to encourage, if any, I mean, I don't know who's going to hear this podcast, who's going to see this podcast. I don't know if we'll ever make it out there into the general population or not. But if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you find yourself in those kind of spaces where, you have a significant influence and you have a platform, and I pray that you draw that line, that you don't compromise your faith, you don't compromise your beliefs, that you have the boldness and the courage to take a stand, that you don't get caught up in that mindset, that lifestyle of trying to fit in or blend in. Because I think that as Christians, we're, especially if you're given that platform, you're called to a higher standard. And so I encourage you to draw that line, to step out, to step up, to take that stand, to represent Christ well in those situations. Don't blend in. Don't blend in. And for the normal everyday Christians, it's also going to get harder as government and as, laws are getting passed that are going to squeeze the Christian, squeeze the church, as society again becomes more and more godless. Those who are godly are going to be forced to make a lot more tougher choices. So, like, again, on one side, I'm super excited for this time that we're living in, because it's like the war's on now. It's there. It's right in our face. You can't deny it anymore. The devil is showing his hand. He's like, I'm here. And so it's the time for the church. It's time for the Christians to rise up and take our place. And so on one side, that's super exciting, but on another side, it's going to be challenging, because tough choices are going to have to be made. Christians are going to have to take a stand. You can't be afraid to stand up for truth. And, as I've pointed out in previous podcasts, we're living in an upside down world. The kingdom of darkness is literally upside down, the complete reverse of the kingdom of God. And so you can't sit on the fence anymore. You're going to have to make a choice. You're going to have to make tough choices, and it's just going to get harder and harder and harder to do that. And so it's both exciting. I think we're going to see a lot of crazy things in God. I think God's Spirit there's going to be an outpouring of His Spirit. There's going to be a move of God that's going to sweep the globe, and it's already happening in certain parts of the world. But then also at the same time, I think the persecution level, especially in the Western world, it's already been happening in other parts of the world for hundreds of years. But the Western church is going to get pushed, is going to get squeezed. And we have to decide, are we going to allow ourselves to get squeezed, or are we going to fight back? Are we going to stand up for what's right, for what's truth, for what's godly? Are we going to stand up for righteousness and let the chips fall where they may? And so I think that's where we're at. And I just think that what happened this past Sunday was very in your face. I mean, the devil, he played his hand. He stepped onto the scene and says, boom, I'm here. I'm center stage. It's my show. And it's pure mockery. It's pure mockery to the Christian. It's pure mockery to the church. It's pure mockery to God. And, that can't be, we just can't take that anymore. It can't be okay. It can't be accepted. And I think that we have to take our stand as the church, as the body of Christ, and in truth and in love and in the power of the Spirit, engage in this spiritual battle that we are in. And the intensity of it's only going to grow more and more. And so it's important that we are connected. It's important that we're not isolating ourselves. It's important that we are plugged in to, connected to other believers who are like-minded. And it's important that as the church, we don't turn a blind eye to this, that we don't pretend like everything is fine, that we don't, it's important that we take this battle head on, that we take it serious, that we see it for what it is, that we see it for what it is. And so, I think that's my thoughts. on this particular issue. I hope that made sense. I don't know. I'm gonna have to listen to this one over again after I stop the record button, just to make sure that I actually sounded somewhat coherent. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I hope it provokes you a little bit to figure out, to self-examine, to figure out, like, hey, like, how close am I with God? Do I have a line? Is my line blurred, or am I willing to draw that line in my life, in my situation, where I find where God has me, and really examine yourself, your life, and your situation. I think every Christian needs to do that. I know for me, the Lord's challenging me in that area where I'm having to take stock of my life, and because to be honest, like I've never been super into culture, things that are happening. I've kind of just removed myself from that, and I've always just kind of lived in my own little bubble, my own little world of my walk with God, and didn't really concern myself with culture. But this last few months, I feel like the Lord has really put in my heart to really take stock of where we are as a culture, where we are as a society, and how that affects the church, and how that's going to affect Christianity and the Christian life and all that stuff. And so it's important to take stock about where you're at, figure out where you're at with the Lord, and make some choices of how you're going to navigate your life, and what it means to live for Jesus in this crazy culture and society that we're living in. And so, yeah, I hope this was, encouraging to you and just helps you to think. And so take some time with the Lord, and see what he would have to say to you about this. Well, that's it for episode number 8 of the Tat2d Preacher podcast. Thanks so much for listening. And again, if you haven't already, feel free to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And don't forget to leave me a 5-star review. If you haven't already, that would just make me smile. So have an awesome rest of your day or evening, whenever you're listening to this and watching this from. And I will see you all in the next episode. Much love. God bless.